Hello, welcome to my channel. Today I am on day number 19th of the new cycle meditations. I have not yet decided how I'm going to do the next group of meditations. I think I'm going to continue with those individual guides. It seems to be working the best. I just have to wait and see what happens or where spirit guides me in regard to that. Since I'm on day number 19, I'm starting to kind of think about where it's going to go after Wednesday when I do the Wednesday meditation. So that is what I've been thinking about and considering and contemplating. So if you have any ideas on what I could do, then just drop them in the comments below and see if they might actually ring true for me, or if they would be something that you might want to try. So either way, we'll see what happens. But as it is right now, we're on day number 19th. Today is March 10th, 2025, and here we go. I said, I'm talking to Nigel today. So I said, I just love nostalgia, I said. Yes, but not to live in it, he responded. I said, I was just thinking about what the years when I was a kid and how we did the craziest things. It is, in essence, nice to recall those days, but not to recreate them entirely. Nigel says, the past is always a good thing to reflect upon, specifically as we discuss the history and how that is often a teacher, even in today's fast-paced world. Do you recall how you often characterized me in your stories? I said, I do. You were a figure that came out of the Renaissance period, in a beautiful costume of the nobility. I don't know if it was a conscious thing or if it was just a sense that I always got when I thought about you. I just always considered you to be a very kind and gentle man. I guess it's sort of a grown-up version of the imaginary friend. And Nigel says, I was never an imaginary friend, Yvette. I was always with you. I said, why is it that people associate an angel or guide with an imaginary friend? And Nigel says, it's quite easy. An imaginary friend comes directly from the heart of a child. Children are capable of seeing things that adults cannot, even that adults cannot even begin to grasp or understand. Consider this. As a child, you enjoyed fantasy. I said, I still do. And he said, indeed. Fantasy is something that comes from the imagination. But what if I were to tell you that all of the things you imagined were stemmed to an alternate reality? It does not mean, nor does it imply, that if you jump off a cliff, you will grow wings and fly. But spiritually, this could be an idea of a spiritual flying. I said, wait, a spiritual flying? He said, let me finish. Maybe by the end of this, you can understand the depth of childlike spirituality. When a child invents a friend, the idea of that stems from a longing that is manifest inside of them. Many people believe that the act of a child doing this is not normal, but the notion of that imaginary friend comes from a deep sense of connectedness. You never really had an imaginary friend, did you? And I said, why not? And Nigel says, because you saw me at an early age. You believed, although you were often lonely, that there was always someone there for you. This is why it is that many children have no imaginary friends. They are either surrounded by friends or family, or they understand the deep spiritual facet of who they are. It is also why you didn't speak of me. You said in that interview we did not speak, but I never told you not to speak of what happened. I merely know that you were unwilling. You had seen an adult response to other children who had opened up about it. Yeah, I remember how society frowned on kids having a story to tell about this. It was like the child being blocked from expressing that sort of thing. When I was little, I remember Big Bird having a Snuffleupagus as a friend. None of the grown-ups could see him, but when they spoke of him, the energy felt as though it was a negative sense, like, oh, you're talking about your imaginary friend again. Nigel said, the message you got from that, instead of feeling as though the act of having this friendship was wrong or ill-advised. I said, yes, when I was in 3rd grade, a bunch of the teachers put me into this computer test thing. I didn't understand it at the time, I didn't know what it was, but later I was either told or figured it out for myself that the teachers all thought I was, let's just say, mentally not all there. The word of the day was the R word, which I will never ever use, not even for the sake of description, but you get the idea. And Nigel says it did explain why you were so sensitive to the time at the time about people. It also was like a person without the proper education making assertions about people and others, just jumping into that particular jumping on that particular bandwagon. I said, yeah, the last thing I realized was that the teachers were treating me like an outsider, and I pretty much felt like one anyway. Nigel said, the act of putting you in front of the computer and having you take these tests was a complete summation of how you are as a person. I said, how does that coincide with the events playing out in the real world? Nigel says, that's an easier question to answer than you think. The notion of those tests are not necessarily aligned with society taking a test, but instead of the ignorance of society as a whole. The means of judgment are the actual reality of all of this. Okay, you have this computer before you, like the spitting out answers. This answer is right, this answer is wrong, and so on. The labels exist. The labels exist from the attitudes that people have that are aligned with the notion of right versus wrong, right behaviors versus wrong behaviors. Slot in the answer to any given question, specifically regarding a psychological condition. The response you give are a determination of how, dare I say, normal you are. Sociologically, people are asking this question on a regular basis. Let's use the example of tariffs, and as they seem to be the general question. One country wishes to exert power over another country. They do not want it to seem obvious, so they, instead of coming out with it and doing it, that is to say, instigating them without falling back on 30-day extensions, they must test the waters. How will the other country react to it? When all these things have consequences, then one must conclude that this will be an action that reaps consequences. I said, okay, but how does that parallel with the test I had to take as a child? And Nigel said, the test you took was the question of how does one proceed forward with you as a person. The manner in which you took the test and the answers you gave way for even more questions and more options. When you look at what is happening, consider this. Question 1 would have 2 options, yes or no. Yes, we put sanctions on a country, or no, we don't put sanctions on a country. Once the choice of yes is tried, another question comes up. Do we start on 1 month, or 2 months, or 6 months, and so on? The responses to that would branch out to more questions or options. The answer of no will end the notion entirely, but the actual asking of the question may reap consequences anyway. When you look at what happened when you had been told to start this test, they were consequences. In other pupils' eyes, they saw you as being taken out of class and ultimately made an example of. This is precisely the idea that is being studied here. You would not have even been asked to take part, then you would have not been teased. By asking the question, the consequences would have happened regardless. Do you see how this works? I said, is a question really that dangerous? I mean, was it better if the initial response is no? And Nigel said, perhaps, but the question implies that someone was thinking about this. You have no reason to feel badly about having to take the computer test, but the teachers who pushed this were making blind assumptions about your intelligence. The other children saw this and reacted accordingly. This is like the Canadians reacting to the question regardless of the actual outcome. I said, so in essence, the question is probably never should have been raised in the first place. And Nigel says, yes, but the question was raised, and how instead of accepting that the idea is ludicrous, you are being drawn into a reality where those asking the questions are digging themselves even deeper with other absurd notions. Why are they doing this? I asked. Nigel said, justification. They are trying to justify their actions for the rest of the world. I said, I don't want to psychoanalyze them. I'm not qualified. I mean, essentially, we can't fix stupid. Nigel said, no, we cannot fix their ignorance, but the key to understanding what is happening in the world is for us to unpack it. Using it in relation to your own experiences, this will help to understand why these things are happening. In looking at your own experiences in relation to world events, you will be better able to understand that how the universe works. The universe is not trying to make you the winner or loser in any given scenario. It merely is the action or reaction of whatever it gets. Think of it in terms of Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal or opposite reaction. You put negative energy into the world, and the result will be negative. You put positive energy into the world, and the result will be positive. The universe is not like a battery where you put a positive end on a positive pole. You will get nothing. The universe works dramatically as a cause and effect. Look at current events. Let's take a government decision to cut programs that people love. If they try to take them away, the reaction will be people in the streets protesting, cause and effect. If you go on a tour and talk to the people, the result will be the positive reception. What you put into the universe will be what you get back, a sort of boomerang effect. What is happening right now is the leader of the U.S. is doing a good deal of terrible acts, and when he gets pushback from the people or from other world leaders, he goes and whines about how mean the people are to him. He has failed to see that what he is doing is considered evil by many people. He is not able to bully or persuade others to react or respond to his actions positively. I said, some do. And Nigel says, indeed, but most do not. People are responding to other world leaders who are saying no. This is giving the people more courage to say no as well. It also goes back to the meadow analogy. Once one or two people step out, it makes it easier for others to do the same. You must not be worried about whether or not it will or will not happen. People are seeing it. The notion of power is not what it was. People are starting to take back their power. They are starting to see that the power they possess is much stronger than anyone can imagine. This is why we are seeing more and more people seizing hold of the power that is inside of them. The hope lies in them being able to assert this. The massive numbers of people coming out to a place where the values and ideas of their youth and childhood have not vanished, but are here, and all they must do is grasp hold of that and embrace the notion that it is significant. I said, so we have come full circle. We are back to the ideals of childhood. And Nigel says, yes, because the ideas of children are generally pure at heart. That is when a child does not have an adult feeding toxins into their spirit. The gravest mistake that people can make is trying to put their grown-up prejudices and judgments into the heart and mind of a child. The use of a child to protect the ego of an adult is the very same as those who allow a child to endure abuse as a means of protecting an adult. I said adults can be vicious in that regard. And Nigel says, I know, love. You yourself have been through that. You do recall what happened when you confronted the adult who basically allowed you to be abused. I said, yes. I was given an earful of how that had been a cycle. I resolved myself to ending that cycle. Nigel says, in other words, you decided not to have children. And I said, yes. I did not want to put another human being through what I went through. I'm glad that I made that decision, even if others around me judge me for it. Nigel says, you still care for children, even if you are not a mother. I said, I try, but anymore, I'm glad that I have no kids. I just want to be a childless cat lady. Nigel said, who will soon have an opportunity to have a cat. I think you will be a good cat mom. And I said, oh, or the official can opener. Nigel says, or that. So what do you take from today's chat? I said, I'm surprised that I was able to recall that computer stuff from my childhood and how it coincided with world events. Nigel says, you will find that upon further study of your life experiences, you will be able to guess with relatively good accuracy what will happen. I said, is that part of enhancing my psychic abilities? And Nigel says, yes. You asked Metatron about that, and he said that you have psychic abilities already. He said that everyone could do the same. Take that, unpack a past event in your life, and live it up to an event today, and line it up to an event today. It will help you to infer where the energy is going. It will also prove Mr. Einstein's quotation as a rational gauge for determining how to infer future events. The key to understanding your own abilities lies not in getting psychic hits, although they can happen, but in understanding your own personal history in relation to looking at current events. People may say, Yvette, you are repeating this again and again. And I would say to them, this is the key to understanding what is happening and on a grander scale. You cannot gauge the future without reflecting on the past. Ramon said this so many times. In order to understand the present day energies, you have to look at the past. Some argue that reflecting too much on the past will only make things worse or cease to help in looking to the future. That is not the case. You asked me about the idea of nostalgia when we began today. Perhaps it is a good place to end on. You reflect on the past because you see that it is significant. It is not the sum total of all that is going on, but it does help to determine where you as a society are going. It would behoove you to look at the past, reflect on the impacts of it, but not live in or dwell on it. When you are able to see the impacts of past events or present day reality, then you will be able to make the decisions that will not impede you, but enable you to grow, both mentally and spiritually. Is that not where you want to go? And I said, yes, I do think so. Thank you, Nigel. Your wisdom is so needed right now. And he said, always, love. I'm always here for you. And that's where we ended. So, yeah, this, again, about the history. It seems to be a recurring theme here that in order to look at the future, you have to actually look at the past, and you have to see where everything coincides and where everything lines up. And it just seems to be just a recurring theme with my videos and with what's going on. But it is important, and I think that Nigel is correct in focusing on how studying the past will help enable me to understand and sort of navigate what's going to happen in the future. I don't know. I don't trust that I have psychic abilities to do this, but I do look at my history a lot, and I see that what my history did and what is happening now and how they correlate or line up. And so it might be a way to enhance my understanding of what's going on. At any rate, that's it for today, and I hope that you got something out of this. And I know that, again, it's repeating. There's a lot of repeated information here, but I think that they are telling me this because it's important to case study, to look at, to unpack, and to understand that there is a reason for all of this. So while it may seem a little bit crazy to go into this all over again, it does seem like that the more I unpack about it, the more questions come or the more ideas come to my mind. And I'm hoping that that will also help you with coping with and understanding why it is these events are happening as they are happening. At any rate, I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for staying with me till the end. And I wish you all the best. And as always, Namaste.